Welcome to another episode of the BS Podcast, the show that looks at how behavioural change insights are being applied in the wild. Episodes feature renowned behavioural experts across industries and organisations, from management and marketing to policy and public health, and more. Let's dive in and see what all the BS is about. Here's your host from The Behaviourist, Nick Hobson.
Hello, BS listeners, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I am excited to have on Stefano Puntoni. Stefano is Professor of Marketing at the Rotterdam School of Management. He joined RSM after completing a PhD in marketing at London Business School. His research has appeared in leading journals, including the Journal of Consumer Research, Journal of Marketing Research, Journal of Consumer Psychology, Journal of Marketing, Nature, Human Behavior, Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, and Management Science. And the work has also been featured in media outlets such as Harvard Business Review, The Times, and The Wall Street Journal. And Stefano's research is absolutely fascinating. We'll get into that. But first, I want to welcome you to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I want to start with this quote, which I think this is like really recent, within probably the past 24 hours. So, did you say this? First, confirm yes or no. Did you say, "quote, I want the magic, but I don't want the creep"?
Yes, I did.
You did. First of all, I love that. It's such a you gotta like patent that or something, or copyright, or use it, reuse that as a tagline for some sort of, I don't know what, but it's great. So, can you can you without burying the lead too much, can you tell listeners what the context is? Yeah, tell the story behind that line.
It was a post I made just yesterday afternoon on LinkedIn. Basically, I had this weird, creepy, and eerie experience where we've been talking about strengthening the Wi-Fi on the top floor of the house, and we have this power line adapter that you can extend. And I was talking around the lunch table with my family. Well, maybe we should look into this. And then my son, who's 13, and as you may imagine, is very keen on strong Wi-Fi everywhere. So he said, "I'm gonna go to the store." I said, "I'm busy, I can't do it today." But he said, "I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go to the store and ask them about which things we can add to our system." And so he goes physically to the store and talk to a person there, comes back, tells me something about it. Okay, that's it. And then 2 hours later, I get, the morning later, I get an email from Amazon, basically recommending me to buy that very product that he was talking about. And I just found it so creepy because I had not been making comments online. I had not been searching for information on Google or on Amazon. I basically have no clue how.
This was just a conversation with your family around the table.
Yeah, this was basically a real conversation done within the private context of the home. And wow. I don't know, maybe it's a very bizarre coincidence. But the funny thing is, when I posted that, you know how many people replied with similarly creepy experiences where, they have no clue how the companies were able to make some kind of connection and serve them some digital advertising based on some conversation that was assumed to be completely private. It's really strange.
Yeah. Happens to me. So yeah, I'm probably I'm definitely one of those people who saw it and read it and go, "Oh shit, that has happened to me," and it has to me and my wife. We, again, private conversation, so-called private conversations in one's household. Do you have an Alexa, Google, sort of home assistant?
No, I don't have one of those smart devices precisely because of privacy concerns.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So do you think they're listening in? What's your hypothesis? Let's sort of don our scientist hats for a second, and let's assume it's not a coincidence, and there's some sort of nefarious play here with the big tech. What's your hypothesis?
So I'm not an expert on this topic. Digital advertising is not my thing, so I'm totally talking out of my ass. But so I understand retargeting. This is something we've been used to for many years. Basically, you go on Google, you say, fly to Paris, and then every banner ad is an ad for flying to Paris. Okay, that one is a connection. You understand how the advertising system works, the auctioning behind the browsing experience, the infrastructure that has been built in the last decade or two by Google and its partners. So that one, I think you can easily understand, and it's still annoying, but you can see how that works. Now, what we've seen is much more intrusive advertising, which somehow is able to basically companies are able to collate information about users in a way that can make a connection between a place, a time, a person, and a need, which then gets translated into some kind of advertising auction or some kind of marketing
Mm.
action, like in this case, an email.
Mm.
And yeah, I don't know in this particular case what triggered the advertising message. Maybe the device is listening. There's a lot of people that argue that once you give permission to a device, an app to access your microphone, it might do so even at times when you don't think it should, um, or that, or I don't know if there are other ways. Maybe somehow my son did something on the phone,
Mm.
going to the store or in the store, and somehow they connected his you know IP,
GPS.
yeah, maybe something like that, with a connection to me probably being the older person in the family who would be in charge of making that kind of decision with the ad. I have got no idea.
All very plausible, though. I mean, and it's like the fact that it is plausible is like is testament to like what a crazy world we live in when this is the reality, and how scary and creepy it really is. And the it reminds, so this is going back 4 or 5 years now, so a long time ago, where I read something online that Google is, is something like Google's listening, and it's through your Gmail app. You accept that long list of legal terms and all that you don't read the small fine print, and you say, yeah, accept, accept, accept. And one of those, I guess, is that they can record. And I went through this channel, and it was like a Reddit a subreddit, and I eventually found out a way to download the audio that was recorded by Google, and used for whatever, targeted advertising. And lo and behold, there was a series of between 10 and 20 audio segments, between 10 and 10 seconds and a minute long, between, for example, me and my wife in the car, just conversing, like having a conversation. And this is being played back to me like months later. And it was like, oh my God. So it is a real thing.
It really shows you we've gone through decades where the mantra has been deregulation. And I'm not a socialist, I'm a business professor, but it tells you we've got to do something. I mean, politicians are always are catching up. They're so much slower than the real world. And
Yeah.
and I think being from Europe, I find, I mean, obviously the Chinese government is not going to do anything about our privacy, and the US government is probably also not going to do anything about our privacy. And in a way, I'm hoping that the European Union, being maybe the slightly irrelevant older member of the
Yeah.
of the power play there, might in fact do something. Now, I was excited about the Department of Justice investigation of Google that was announced.
Yes.
So they might be start doing something about the technology sector that
Yeah.
is required.
Yeah.
And I don't say, I mean, these companies are amazing. I mean, we don't want to. I mean, being Luddite is no solution.
Mm.
What we need is basically good regulation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think they've just gotten away with it for so many years, almost like boiling a frog in live, and what is it, in water or whatever, boiling water, where it's sort of like one small thing led to the next, and they're just such big players. But I am also happy, and I think they just recently announced within the last day or two the similar antitrust probe for Facebook, and
Mm.
likely Amazon will follow, and all those sort of big tech. So that brings me to a byline in what I've read of yours, which is, quote, autonomous technology adoption. Um, when you say that, what do you mean in terms of one of your main research interests?
So I'm basically a consumer decision scientist. So I look at behavioral science from the point of view of consumers, and my interest in the last 5 years has been mostly on understanding how consumers relate to autonomous technology in consumer markets. This might be a lot of different types of technology, but so I'm studying automation in business, but not from the back end side. Not automation in the sense of optimizing business processes, supply chains, and the like.
Mm,
It's been more about consumers are getting benefits from products that have automated features, and by that I mean they have features that allows a machine to do something that the consumer would have previously haven't. to do
Mm.
themselves.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think it's a very fascinating topic. I think it's automation is to some extent the hallmark of technological of progress in a general sense, meaning that automation basically describes the extent to which we are able to control our environment and get stuff done. So in that sense, um, automation. Now we're talking about voice-activated devices, self-driving cars. 50 years ago, it might have been the washing machine, but
Mhm.
that doesn't matter. I mean, the process is the same, where we see business innovating and learning ways to help consumers do stuff through products and services.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
now, what is exceptional now that we've seen a transition where, while up to since the beginning of the industrial revolution, essentially, automation has taken two shapes. One is to replace human labor and I mean physical labor with machine labor, and the
Mhm.
second one is to replace routine labor with the machine labor. And that routine labor to start with was physical routine labor in factories and so forth. Then
Mhm.
became also office routine labor. And what is special now is that we are moving to a situation with automation is now able to start taking care of tasks that are neither physical nor routine. And I think that is what is really unique. And I'm interested in this from a consumer point of view, but I also have a strong side interest on technology on unemployment and what this also means for labor markets. Because when we used to do a lot of physical labor and the machines took that over, what we did then was to move to cognitive labor and do a lot of that. And that has been good for all of us, right? Because that's what been underpinning the incredible wealth that we've been accumulating over the last 100 years.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
now the computers are taking on cognitive labors too. It's not clear to me what other type of labor there is. So
I was gonna
I
say,
think
what's next? Leisure. There's no labor. It's just it frees up for more time and
yeah,
opportunity for leisure, I guess, right?
yet we're working harder than ever. But
Yeah, yeah, that's the ironic thing. Yeah. But on that point, like it's not. I guess the analogy holds, right, from like the early industrial age and how you sort of laid out there, um, automation and machines taking over physical routine labor. Now it's coming to with big data and AI and machine learning. Of course, it's now, like you said, sort of like the job of the knowledge economy worker. Um, what what's the timeline for that? Like I think of like Elon Musk and his neural, is it Neuralink or Neural Lace? I always forget the actual. So if that technology isn't actually that far away, um, does it mean that for your sort of your typical knowledge economy, like you're a finance person or consulting or these sorts of things where it's all very sort of rooted in decision making and in emotional intelligence and leadership, followership, is that ever, I mean, this is such a silly question, but I always think about it and a lot of people do, like is there something that only humans can only do, that is uniquely a human skill, that no matter how advanced our technology gets, it won't be automated or automable?
yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this, and in fact, I've been using the spring lockdown time to do quite a lot of thinking on this topic. I don't really have anything written up yet, but my thinking, and I'm doing this work together with a friend and colleague of mine at ESADE, a business school in Barcelona, called the
Hmm.
Bart de Lange. And what we've been thinking about is, we teach decision making, and we're thinking about, okay, you can talk about human decision making, but maybe more timely and important today is to think about, decision making of humans and machines. So trying to, optimize the collective intelligence of the organization from both silicon and carbon, right? From both our brains
Mm.
and those new artificial brains that are being designed
Mm.
today. And so the next question would be, how do we do that? How do we optimize our collective intelligence? And I think we need a new division of labor where we basically understand which type of jobs machines are better than humans and which types of jobs humans are better than machines, at least for the time being. Because there's a lot of talk about machines having superhuman abilities, right? But we still have a
Mm.
lot of super machine abilities. And I think it's important that we celebrate and we understand that. And the question is, what is it that we can do better
Hmm.
than machines, and make sure we do that. And we do that as well as we can. So I think we need this new, it's kind of like a framework, so ways of thinking about how do we divide work between humans and machines. Now, when
Hmm.
you see a lot of
Hmm.
organizations, they have a workflow, they have a way of processes and ways of thinking about problems and ways of working. And then you've got a new technology coming in, and then that might be I don't know, a conversational commerce tool that helps a sales representative, or some kind of CRM tool that helps managing a customer base, or whatever. You have a million of
Yeah.
those process automation in companies, and people find ways to improve on certain tasks. So these machines get slotted into this existing workflow and way of doing things.
Hmm.
But one problem might be that oftentimes that technology hasn't been, let's say, triggering a broader rethink about what is it that humans should do and machines should do. And I think we need some ways of thinking about that, and so we're trying to develop a framework.
Hmm.
And so, now without going into too much detail, but essentially, machines are good at representational sort of tasks, tasks that require cognitive activities like sensing and memory and essentially matching, matching a
Hmm.
stimulus to some previously encoded stimuli. So that could
Hmm.
be, what um, image recognition software, or language
Speech. Hmm.
speech recognition, or basically prediction algorithms of any kind, where you're trying to predict what product a customer will want, or
Hmm.
predict which news story they will find interesting, or anything like that. And
Hmm.
so ultimately, this is about this basically, matching and data related activities. What they do find difficult to do, meaning machines, is to understand the causal structure behind some of those predictions. Even though interpretable AI is a big buzzword and there's a lot of improvement being made, still
Hmm.
humans have causal reasoning abilities that machines lack. And we, maybe even most important, we have an ability to um, basically flexibly categorize and recategorize the world and the way we see it. We can basically see a phenomenon according to particular dimensions, and we can take a step back and rethink the way that we see that phenomenon using different new dimensions and think about it differently. So for things like innovation and many others,
Hmm.
we need to
Hmm.
now imagine, for example, if I tell you, imagine a mouse with an aviator cap on a small 1920s Red Baron type airplane buzzing around your room. Okay, can you imagine that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's very.
Yeah,
I can see it
you
now.
can
Very
see it,
vivid.
right? Have you ever seen one?
No.
No. Okay. And
Well, maybe when I took a substance once, it was.
maybe we should give peyote to the AI
Yeah.
and see what happens. But
Yeah. No,
But you see
never
what I
seen
mean?
one.
We are able to see
Yeah.
this concept and recombine this concept into
Hmm.
something that is completely new and absent in the
Hmm.
world, and yet you have no problem visualizing it and understanding it.
It's
And
a
I
great
think,
example.
and I think that is what the cognitive scientists would call compositionality, basically this idea of taking wholes into parts and recombining them in new ways.
Hmm. Hmm. I really like that one.
So this is all very abstract, but so the question then becomes, what do you make of these kind of ideas? How do you translate them into concrete suggestions for business? We have some ideas, but yeah,
Hmm.
that's what we're working on right now.
Stay tuned for
Yeah,
that
yeah,
paper, I guess. Yeah, in the
yeah,
next couple of years, right?
yeah,
And I also think, like, outside of the context of like business or knowledge economy workers, and I think about this just because my wife, my partner, is a teacher, and we have a lot of friends who are teachers and or social workers in that sort of space. So that I just can't. That is one area of sort of the labor market that I just can't see being um, taken over or even supplemented heavily by technology and digital. I, I know even Skinner had he had a lot of hope for. I think he called it his teaching machine, And basically he wanted to bring this machine, and this is in like, the 40s. He wanted to bring this machine into the classroom because he believed, through basic stimulus response type psychology, of the behaviorist way of thinking, that machine would be much more effective than the human teacher. But I just don't think that's the case. There's just so much when it comes to actual social emotional dynamics between one person and another, let alone one person, the teacher, and a classroom of 30 kids. Like, that is just, there's so much noise there within the system. um I just see that that's going to be the one area where we have to maintain the humanity. Yeah, what do you think?
So I agree with you, but I also disagree with you, and let me explain why. I
Yeah,
think when you
yeah.
think about, education is a big word, right? You can educate a 2-year-old kindergarten toddler, and you can educate a 45-year-old executive, right? And clearly, there's going to be huge differences in those contexts. But just trying to abstract away, I think there
Mm-hmm.
are when you hear about, okay, machines are taking over. That's not something you read everywhere nowadays. And then the question becomes, what is it that they are not going to take over? And you hear typically a couple of things are coming back over and over again. The first one is kind of a socio-emotional sort of jobs, emotion work, so-called, or the feeling economy. This idea that
Mm-hmm.
people understand people, machines don't understand people, and therefore, when it's important to understand people, you've got to have a person. All right, that's one. The second one is, you hear a lot about also creativity and say, okay, machines can't think outside the box, and therefore we will need people to come up with new, beautiful things. And I think that's one reason why Bart and I have been trying to work on this framework, is because at some fundamental level, I think these kind of pronouncements are mistaken, in the sense that they couch the problem in too broad a term. They're too broad, these categories, to be very useful. Meaning, what does it mean to do emotion work? It's so big a concept. What does it mean to be innovative? I think, if you start breaking it down, what is emotion work? There's a lot of emotion work a machine can do. I mean, if emotion work is to do face recognition, if emotion work is to encode some kind of, understand the emotional language that is being typed in consumer reviews,
Mm-hmm.
or other types, I think machines can do that better than humans at scale. Or innovation. If innovation means testing 1 million chemical compounds to figure out which one might be a good candidate for, a cancer treatment. So basically, the point I'm trying to make is that those broad classes, really within them, have subclasses of jobs that are more of the representation type that machines can do, and more what we call the interpretation type that machines can do and the humans can do. And so,
Mm-hmm.
even within education, I think there's going to be a big room for technology. It's just that it's not going to take over those tasks that require those skills that machines don't have. But those are not all skills. So machines will be able to match, for example, testing materials to a pupil's level of progress in a particular subject. So personalized education and personalized testing is all the rage, because for an individual it's very difficult to do, and the calibration on the fly for each person. And even if they could, it would be too expensive to do it anyway, and so we can't do it. So then the machines will be taking over a lot of those diagnostics, testing, things like that. Inspiration, yeah, no, it won't be. Socio-emotional maturity, probably not in the large part. I'll go back to innovation. You can think of creative discovery. What is the stereotype for creative discovery? Our typical icon. What does it look like for an
Like
idea? What is it?
Einstein?
Yeah, but
Oh,
you
a
think
light
about
bulb.
a light bulb, right? So the idea that you click and bang, the idea is there, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's really like an epiphany, and you have all those, the idea of the genius like Einstein, Pythagoras screaming Eureka in the bathtub, or I don't know,
Yeah.
what is it, Newton with the apple on his head,
The
and
apple. Yeah.
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 So, but that's one way to think about it. And if you think about it in that way, of this flexibly and in some even magical way, making connection between things that we couldn't first connect, then yeah, machines are probably unable to do that. But there is another stereotype of creative discovery. Think about, you know, Edison saying, "I haven't failed. I found 10,000 ways that don't work."
Mm.
Or the famous
Yeah.
one of my favorite scientists, Louis Pasteur, saying, "Luck favors the prepared mind."
Mm.
This is a different way of looking at discovery and saying, you work hard and you get there. And if we think of creative discovery in that way, maybe machines can do it. I refer to the creativity of humans as thinking outside the box and the creativity of machines thinking inside the box. And for some jobs, thinking inside the box won't work, but for many jobs it might, and at least might
Mm-hmm.
complement. So my long answer to your question is basically you need to have a level of granularity that is a
Yeah.
little higher to really understand how machines can play a role. And I think by keeping at a very, very general level the discussion that you hear often in the media, you end up having a situation where either you make very broad pronouncement or you miss out opportunities.
Yeah. That's great. So you definitely called me out on my bullshit, so I appreciate that. Um, but you've in seriousness you have you've actually made an argument that I haven't heard made before. That we are sort of speaking in these broad, sweeping generalizations and sort of broad terms, and so I think so. Going back to the teacher one, I can foresee, for example, I'm just sort of totally pulling this out of my back pocket here. But imagine you have in 20 years, you have a teacher who's in front of a classroom and sort of leading a classroom of 20 or 30 young students, and there's some technology that allows, and this is sort of more with like emotions and emotional interpretation, so the students are in the classroom and it's scanning and tracking the emotional wellness or the affective dynamics of the students in the classroom, and it signals to you as the teacher that one of the students or one of the pupils is experiencing distress. Maybe there's some physio data, maybe it's a physiological reactivity, and so now you, the teacher, are informed by that, knowing that Johnny is experiencing heightened physiological stress and anxiety. And so maybe your interaction with Johnny is going to be different because of that information that you've gleaned. And without that technology, maybe you wouldn't have maybe you wouldn't have known, because Johnny's of course not telling you he's feeling anxious, but he really is. So
You
that's
see what
one
you see
example.
what you're doing. You're basically taking, okay, measurement and representation can be done by machines. The machine will sense something that the human is
Yes.
unable to sense, either because of distance, distraction, noise, or whatever, and
Yeah.
then feed that information onto the teacher, who can then decide what needs to be done about it. Okay, so you are
Yes.
now having a human machine team that is likely to be
Mm-hmm.
much more effective than the human alone. So I think the
Mm.
question is not so much in many situations, it's not so much, are we going to see metallic robots in a classroom? I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. The question is going to be how technology is going to empower teachers and enhance their abilities. And I do think that there are situations where technology is going to be able to replace teachers, but maybe in a slightly different way. Let me explain. No, maybe this is not relevant to primary school type of education that I think you
Mm.
have in mind now. But imagine a university lecture. So now what we've discovered through the COVID-19 crisis is that a lot of education can be done digital, especially with my higher education. And
Mm.
what some people have talked about is about a winner takes all kind of landscape, where technology will enable superstar teachers and professors to reach much larger audiences and starve less, accomplished teachers or famous teachers of opportunities because of that. So
Mm.
I might not have a robot teaching instead of me, but if the superstar MIT professor giving classes online and people can easily attend those, then many might decide that that's better than sitting in my class. And so what you might observe over time then is a polarization of
Mm.
the academic profession, the same way that we have seen polarization in many other professions already. And
Mm.
that will be mediated by technology and probably a lot of AI too, not just communication technology. Um, but um, but I do think that we're going to see a lot of technological replacement in that way. So it's not like a robot matching one for one the human worker, but the technology enabling particular human workers just to do a lot of the job that was previously done by a larger number of people. You see the example of radiologists, right? You're still going to have a radiology department in the hospital, but instead of having 10 people working there, you may have 2 people who are managing the algorithm and making the decisions based on the inputs, and these people will be making a lot of money. But probably 8 radiologists will not be working there.
Yeah, the Pareto principle kind of applied to that. Very interesting. I want to pivot a little bit to talk about this idea of what you call in a framework open source marketing. And in one of your papers, which is on sort of customer empowerment in the digital age, you talk about Lego and what's called, I believe, the Lego Ideas platform. And I know I was actually just talking to a former marketing director of Starbucks Europe, where they did a very similar thing, that sort of like build a platform to bring customers and consumers into the business in a way to help do the marketing and the promotion and the communication for them. That's a bastardization. Could you explain the proper way of what open source marketing it is and why you're excited by it?
Yeah, so the idea is a simple one, and basically it's the observation that many organizational tasks that previously would have been performed within the boundary of the firm increasingly are being performed outside the boundaries of the firm, and that leads to a change in basically a paradigm of organizing. I would call it. So let me make a couple of examples. So if you look at communication, like advertising, it used to be the case that you would basically, as a company, take a big microphone, the biggest you can find, shout into the microphone, and hoping that many people will listen and hopefully react on it. And one of the biggest changes in the marketing discipline in the last decade has been a realization that peer-to-peer communication is more persuasive than company-sponsored communication. So if you tell everybody that the BS podcast is great, people might believe you, might also say, yeah, Nick is making the podcast. What do you think he's going to say? But if you hear the audience listening to the podcast, telling friends and saying, this podcast is great, people might be more, keen to discover it and try it out. Now, because of that, because of this word of mouth kind of marketing revolution that we've seen, a lot of companies have put money into programs that are designed to make customers or other stakeholders outside the organization your communication agents by sharing things on Facebook, by telling others about what you do. And so now we basically have opened up the communication function where we have to basically balance this trade-off between credibility of the message and control over the message. Often you don't pay these people, you can't tell them what they're going to say on your behalf, but you're trying to steer them towards saying something positive. So basically that's for advertising. Take innovation, which is more related to the Lego example you were making. Innovation was also a function that we used to have in-house, and you would have engineers that would basically perhaps take information from the market in the shape of market research and see what people are requiring or what seems to be a good idea to pursue, but essentially devising a new product, a new solution, and then putting out on the market. And increasingly companies are opening up the innovation function. The buzzword will be, user innovation or open innovation. And where basically you are asking your customers to give you ideas about what you should be doing. And there's a lot of research on this showing that that produces better ideas than you would otherwise have. Take a company like Lego. As far as I know, they have about 150 engineers, I'd say designers working on in Lego. But if they can access the ingenuity and of the customer base, which is in the many millions, even if only a tiny fraction of those many millions are interested in participating in some kind of exercise like that, and even if a small percentage of that small percentage is actually able to do something that other people want to buy, we're still talking 1 or 2 orders of magnitude difference compared to the human talent that the company could otherwise access. And there's evidence that indeed that if well managed results in very innovative products and solutions. So this is a second case. A third case, you can think about sustainability, where the whole paradigm of sustainability was, okay, take care of your crap, make sure that your factory runs well, you don't waste resources, that you don't pollute the environment or what's not. And then companies started realizing that oftentimes they occupy a small part of the value chain, and that for as much as they can be efficient and well managed within the factory gate, that is ultimately not making a very big impact on CO2 emissions or whatever other metric of environmental impact you may take. And so companies increasingly have to work with parties outside the company to get those environmental objectives done. So take a company like Unilever in the tea business, like Lipton, for example, is the biggest company in the world in the tea business. But if you look at the value chain, their operations only account for 2% of the CO2 emissions. It's nothing. They can run at zero emissions, essentially, and make no difference. All the emissions are emitted upstream when the farmers grow the tea, and downstream where we boil the kettle in the kitchen. So if Unilever wants to have any impact on the CO2 emissions coming from the tea value chain, they've got to work with people upstream and downstream. So again, you need to collaborate with other agents. So I call this new way of opening up and collaborating with others open source marketing. And so we basically need to organize for collaboration. The companies that will have competitive advantage in this new world will be those that can collaborate, essentially, that have the systems, the know-how, the credibility, and what's not, to attract parties and use soft power to engage them and get good outcomes out of that.
It's interesting that it's sort of ironic that the competitive advantage will lie in collaboration and sort of this ecosystem economy of sharing and partnering up and opening up, and to tap into those resources. That's really cool. Do you have a paper, or is this still one of your other working ideas?
Yeah, I haven't written it up either. No, there is no paper. I developed this in my teaching, but I've been so busy I don't get the time to write these things up.
Well, you just when this podcast, well, the listeners will be listening, so it's live. You should just transcribe what you said there, and then that's your introduction. That's your first 3 pages, because I think you just said it with perfect enunciation, no ums or uhs or delays. So there you have your first 3 pages of the paper. Very cool. One final question for you, if you don't mind. So this is the BBB, or the Big Behavioral Brainstorm is what I call it. I ask every guest at the end of every show, or every episode. So of all the problems that exist out there in society right now, which one, if you could only choose one, would you say could stand to benefit from a behavioral or a psychological related solution?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question from having listened to your podcast, and I think there are many questions one could give, because I think behavioral science can essentially provide a contribution to almost any question. Take the COVID-19 crisis, and but I'm going to give another answer, and I think that is the environmental crisis. And the reason why I mention this is that I think, and I'm not the first one to say this, I think, is that the environmental crisis has some features to it that make it an especially difficult problem. Because if you think about all the principles that we know about behavior change, what are the ways to make people act, whether it is about the timing, whether it is about concreteness, and so forth. You just go through the list, and you'll find that basically the environmental crisis is in the wrong side of the spectrum for almost all of them. It's a very difficult problem to get people to act upon. Even when you recognize this is an issue, it's difficult for individuals to act upon their own individual beliefs, and it's very difficult for those individual actions to then translate into collective action. The outcomes are very uncertain. The timeline is very delayed. The individual impact of any given action is negligible. And you go down the list and you find that basically, because of all these features, this is a very hard nut to crack. And let alone the technological aspects, the regulatory aspects, the business aspects, all those are also very hard to crack. But from a behavioral science perspective, it's just a very difficult thing. I mean, you are facing a monster here, where we have a problem that we know is coming. we know we have to act upon it, if not for us, for our children. And yet, it's very difficult to make sufficiently fast progress, which is not to say there is no progress. I think that we've made tremendous progress. But when you look at the scale of the problem and the pace of change, I do think that we need to have more behavioral scientists thinking about interventions and in the policy scape and in the business domain to think about how do we narrow that gap between where the problem needs to be for our understanding of behavior to suggest that there would be tangible progress, and where the problem currently is in terms of the way that it is framed to people, the way that people understand it, the way that they experience it in their everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you for
it
that.
It was a little gloomy though at an end. I don't know.
Well, it is a problem. Now that I think of it, I end every show, and if we're thinking of the sort of the primacy effect or recency effect, and I end every show on a bit of a gloomy note. So I should probably rethink that. Maybe I'll introduce the BBB at the beginning, but it's food for thought anyway. Stefano, it's been great. Thank you so much. And I feel we just barely scratched the surface. So you're gonna have to come on for round 2 in maybe a year from now.
Thanks a lot, Nick. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun. I look forward to talking more.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
A final farewell note before ending. All the show notes, links to papers, resources, and materials mentioned in this episode can be found on the BS podcast page of The Behaviorist, where you can find all episodes and lots of other interesting and easy to apply sciencey stuff. Just head on over to www.behaviorist.biz/BS podcast. The show is edited and co-produced by Laura Christine and Noelle Rain, and visual artwork, banners, and animated GIFs created by the talented Iris Deng of dengit.org. That's DENGIT.org. Definitely go and check it out. Lastly, if you'd like to join me in the mission of spreading the good BS word, remember to rate and review the show on iTunes or wherever else you get your podcast fix. Quite a bit of work goes into these episodes, and a little love would go a long way. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, remember, keep your facts ugly and your hypotheses beautiful.